Hi, everyone. Well, I think it never hurts to look once again at the layout of Jerusalem, its old city, the Temple Mount, and in relation to other areas. So today we are not heading to the old city. We've already done tours of each quarter. We've walked on the ramparts of the city, of the old city walls. We walk around the city walls. About 2 weeks ago, we wrapped up a short series of walks in the Hell Valley, right? In the Hell Valley. And now we are in the Kidron Valley. Well, so the Kidron Valley, it basically runs through the from the eastern side of Jerusalem, and it separates the old city, the Temple Mount, and from the Mount of Olives. And as I say in the tour description, this area has an immense significance to the three monotheistic religions, and this is true. In this layout, we have a lot more locations, a lot more sites within the old city, and we have a good layout of the Temple Mount and what kind of sites you can find on the Temple Mount itself. And there is a very important remark. Make sure you see the Golden Gate. It's a very important gate for our narrative today. And basically, so as you can see, half of the eastern, that means the right side of the old city walls, is going to be incredibly relevant because half of it actually coincides with the wall of the Temple Mount. And we're going to be talking a lot about the Temple Mount today. We have done about 10 episodes of the Temple Mount tours. Just incredible. I know. So for you to understand what's going on here, there's a little bit of the terrain story. So 2 weeks ago, we wrapped up the tours of the Hinnom Valley, or also known as the Hell Valley. Today, we are in the Valley of Kidron. However, the Kidron Valley has another name, the Valley of Jehoshaphat, or the Valley of Judgment. And this is a very important name. So Jehoshaphat can be translated from, Hebrew, somewhat like the Yahweh. It's one of the names of God. Lord judges. And that's why another name of this valley is the Valley of Judgment, or the Valley of Judges, the Valley of Judgment. And it has a lot to do with the end of days. And all the three religions have, I would say, clear-cut understanding of how the end of days is going to happen, where it's going to happen. And it just happens that this is going to be the eye of the storm, to put it mildly. Well, you have now the understanding. Obviously, the walls of Jerusalem, I would like to remind you that the old city, the way it's looking now, it's not exactly the same as it looked at times of Jesus, or as it looked in the first and the second temple period. Well, times of Jesus is the time of the second temple period, but also we need to understand that the current layout and the current walls are from the Ottoman period, 1530. But this section of the Temple Mount, the eastern wall, is the same, of course. And a little map from the times of Jesus. That's obviously all these visuals I've just taken from open sources from the internet. Mount of Olives has an incredibly important, has really great significance for Christianity, of course. That's why, not only we're going to be focusing on the Jewish narrative, but and we're going to see for a little bit the Mount of Olives cemetery. We'll talk about the significance of that cemetery. Also, we'll be visiting two churches, and we will be talking also about the Muslim tradition as well, of understanding of the judgment and the place of the Kidron Valley and Mount of Olives in this regards. So what we have seen so far, we walked in the valley itself, and we saw some of the most incredible burials. The thing is that the Kidron Valley, of the Valley of Judgment, has great number of burials that span the first temple period, like 3,000 years ago, up until now. Well, I'm talking about the slopes of it and the Mount of Olives, of course. So let's talk about the Valley of Jehoshaphat. In the book of Joel, it is mentioned, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the Valley of Jehoshaphat, and we will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel. So the Valley of Jehoshaphat is believed to be the place where all nations will be gathered. Jehoshaphat, not yet the Kidron Valley, right? Or another, let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. We're talking about some really big judgment here, right? Something really big is going to happen. Multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near, and the valley of decision. Well, decision or judgment is also a matter of translation. Or there is another version. So in the book of Zechariah, we're talking again about the end of days, about gathering of all nations together. And his feet shall stand in the day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. This is before Jerusalem on the east. This is the Mount of Olives. And the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west, and there shall be a very great valley. So here is the question: when comes Kidron Valley? So we have the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Okay, we have the Mount of Olives, and yet shall flee to the valley of the mountains, and the Lord my God shall come, and that the saints with thee. So at least in the two books, we come across the day of judgment, the day when all the nations will be gathered in the big valley, and the location is actually given to us quite clearly. The valley, the east of Jerusalem, that's Mount of Olives. The thing is that Kidron Valley, this name is also mentioned in the Old Testament. However, it's only a much later tradition when Kidron Valley, or the Valley of Jehoshaphat, actually began to denote the same location, to signify the same location, one of the same location. But it's without a doubt the area that has always, throughout the more than 3,000 years of history of Jerusalem, played an important role. And right now, what we see here is the continuation of the valley to the south and to the west, because this is from the previous tour last week. So we spoke about several Arab villages located exactly to the left of the old city, and also of the great number of the burials there. Right to the left hand from us, we are looking at the southern wall of the Temple Mount. That's what we talked about last weekend, and also a huge area called Ophel just before the Temple Mount, with a great number of findings that date to various periods, starting from the first temple period, that's 3,000 years ago, and there's still excavations are going on, and there's findings being made on a daily basis, but it's going to take time before it's going to be cataloged and published. So we just wait. And also another important note here, that it was exactly on the slope of the Kidron Valley, and the eastern slope of the Kidron Valley, where actually the very first Jerusalem was established, which is the city of David. So the very important remark here is that the oldest part of Jerusalem is not even in the old city, and it's not even the Temple Mount. The oldest one is south to the Temple Mount, eastern slope of the Kidron Valley, where 3,000 years ago, around that, King David conquered the Jebusite city, the Canaanite city, and built his first temple, his first palace where he placed a tabernacle, and only later on his son would be able to build the temple to the north of the city of David. So that's also a very important note. So Kidron Valley always played great significance. And one of the graves that we discovered last time was, for example, this one. It's very difficult to date these graves, but with this one is, tradition connects it to a daughter of a pharaoh, meaning this could be technically one of the wives of Solomon, because one of his wives was the daughter of a pharaoh. Why it's called so? Because it has some, I would say, in the 19th century, this is when the name stuck, kind of, to this grave. This is, by the way, the photo from Wikipedia. It has a little bit of a Egyptian-like decorations, and it's a bit different from the other graves that we have in the valley. Like, look at these two, and obviously my absolute favorite. This is, by the way, the photograph taken in turn of the 20th century. That's the pilgrimage on the on the Mount of Olives, and we are overlooking the eastern wall of the Temple Mount and the corner of the eastern and southern wall over there. And you will see that not much has actually changed when we stand on that side. So there is you may also notice next to these huge structures a lot of smaller holes. Those are also graves, all the graves hewn in the rock. So my favorite is absolutely the one to the left, the grave of Absalom. But that's important to remember that it's just a tradition. So these graves are believed, let's say the tradition dates them to the First Temple period. However, this grave, well, the archaeologists actually dated to the first, maybe the second century BCE, sometimes even first century Common Era. Another grave, well, but Absalom was the son of King David that went against his father and was killed for that and punished for that. So this is another grave over there, the tomb of Nehazir. Hazir is one of the priestly families from the Second Temple period, and it's all written there over there. So on the lintel, you have a very detailed description to which family this grave belonged. And yes, of course, we have illustrations and photographs from various periods, but mainly, of course, the Ottoman one, because it lasted for 400 years. And right next to it, I'd like to draw your attention to one detail. Have a look how many more, all these graves around the tomb to the right, which is the tomb of Zechariah. Just have a look how many tombs were there. It almost drowned in the graves. It was almost eaten by the graves. But well, it's looking different now. It was cleaned. Also, a lot of the graves that were destroyed in the course of the Jordanian occupation of Jerusalem. Let's call it this way. This is the tomb of Zechariah. The amazing thing is that this tomb is a monolith. It was just cut in the rock, and the graves are actually behind it. And well, there are graves behind it, and there's also a grave underground. Before that, it was all covered with other burials. Tomb of Zechariah. Which Zechariah? Good idea. So it could be one of the prophets, Zechariah, who also happened to be from a priestly family, of course. It's the First Temple period, or it could be actually father of John the Baptist, who was also a Zechariah. The two traditions attribute it to different Zechariahs, but well, given so many Jewish graves, around it, the tradition goes on for sure. And you will also see how many more graves have emerged over the course of the past century. Now we keep on walking in the Kidron Valley, And to the to the right side from us is the Mount of Olives. And Mount of Olives, the big part of it, is simply one gigantic Jewish cemetery. Speaking of Absalom, so even though we spoke about him on the previous tour, I'll briefly mention a few things here. So it's written here from the second book of Samuel. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and reared up for himself the pillar which is in the King's Vale, and it's called Absalom Monument into this day. Well, another tradition claims that Absalom, even before his death, already erected himself a pillar, kind of a monument, and then he was killed and was buried under his own pillar. It's just one of the traditions. Well, another tradition. Or over here, so that's from the book of Joel, right? That's exactly what we've talked about. In the book of Joel, it's clearly written that it would be the Valley of Jehoshaphat where the great judgment will take place. And Jehoshaphat actually means God, Lord, judges. Simply, as simple as that. The other question is it the same as the Kidron Valley? This is a much later tradition. So one and the same valley is identified much later. That's around the Byzantine period, somewhat around that time. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. And as the king passed over the Kidron Valley, all the people passed over toward the path of the wilderness. So in the book of Samuel, we have mentions of Kidron Valley, but is it one and the same valley? Is Kidron Valley the Valley of Judgment? It's not explicitly mentioned in the Old Testament. It doesn't say that, oh yeah, Kidron Valley is actually the Jehoshaphat Valley, but the geography, the location don't really give us many options. Well, it seems like it really fits. And we have this tradition of Kidron Valley being also called the Jehoshaphat Valley. So imagine they're walking, already approaching the Mount of Olives cemetery. We're going to spend a little time in the cemetery. I know not many of you are fans of cemeteries, but I just cannot really skip that part. From here, we are looking at the eastern wall of the Temple Mount and obviously the Gate of Mercy or the Golden Gates in the center, right over there. And over here, this is just a nice lookout point. Let me get back there for a sec. This is a lookout point of the Mount of Olives Cemetery. So the importance of the Mount of Olives Cemetery is not simply because it's overlooking the old city, but it is believed to be exactly the place next to, as close as it gets to the Temple Mount. And it is believed that it would be exactly through this valley that the judgment will take place, the great judgment, right? So when Messiah comes back, all the people would rise, and the first people to rise would be those buried on the Mount of Olives. Hence the number of graves here. And again, as I said, the graves, well, altogether, let's say span 3,000-year period altogether. And also you will, every now and then you will find graves. You'd find, some tombstones, crushed, half of it, a piece of a tombstone here and there. This is still the aftermath of the infamous war, and the period of Jordanian occupation or the Jordanian control, whatever you apply. It started with the Independence War, and starting from 1948, 1949, and 1967 up until the Six-Day War. So the Jordanians would be completely controlling the old city, the entire old city, and also the Mount of Olives and the Valley of and the Kidron Valley was also heavily guarded, controlled, and that's why a lot of Jewish burials were destroyed at that time, looted. Okay, so this particular video is made up of a gazillion of videos, actually. And I filmed them at different periods, sometimes with my study group, and sometimes I feel, well, I think that this video, I didn't even have a gimbal with me, but I wanted to include as much footage as possible to give you, well, like different perspectives. Well, this is exactly that very uh, well pillar of the Absalom tomb. And by the way, the this was just the so-called nefesh, right? It's not really the tomb; it's a construction. It's a special. Um, how shall I put it? Nefesh would be a special part of a Jewish tomb for the free passage of the soul. So that's the nefesh. And from here we see the Jewish graves, and the cemetery goes on to the left and keeps on growing. By the way, and this is the photograph, well, taken, well, approximately from the same location. Um, so for those who are not exactly familiar with the traditions of Jewish burials, I will just mention that you won't find flowers on the tombs, on Jewish tombs. Mainly, you will see stones, and since the Mount of Olives has such a great significance for the Jews, the burials on the Mount of Olives are incredibly expensive. And also, this is the place where a lot of great rabbis are buried, and very well important intellectuals and whatnot. So I'm leaving the cemetery. I'm not a big fan of cemeteries myself, and I'm walking right now on the side of the Mount of Olives. However, I want to give you as many different perspectives as possible. So we're going to cross the valley very quickly. I know, once again. So we were on the side of the Mount of Olives. The Kidron Valley was to the left. And now we are going to be watching a short video filmed on the opposite side, on the side of the Temple Mount and the eastern wall of Jerusalem. There is a road down below. So we're going to be walking there just for a minute to see that area where we just walked from a distance. Again, as I said, so the eastern wall is the most, well, it is important because it has the gates, the eastern gates that are called the golden gates, the gates of mercy. Why they are so important? Because they also happen to be the closest actually to the Holy of Holies. And it is believed that exactly through that gate, the priests would be taking the scapegoat to the Temple Mount for the sacrifice and everything. So, and exactly through this gate, Messiah is expected to enter the Temple Mount, right? So that's just important again to mention. And now we are standing again, as I said, on the opposite side. So a minute ago, we were on that side of the valley, and now we're looking at the same location from the opposite side. And we're going to be walking a little bit towards the south, a little bit, and the Kidron Valley and the Mount of Olives is going to be to our left and to my left. So as we go, the first thing we see, obviously, so Kidron Valley, apart from the graves and burials, has some churches as well. For example, there is the Saint Stephen Monastery, Greek Orthodox monastery. It's important to mention because there are several Saint Stephen monasteries, because different traditions place Saint Stephen's burial in different locations. But speaking of the Greek Orthodox tradition, it's there in the Kidron Valley. And Saint Stephen was, let's say, well, we refer to Saint Stephen as the proto martyr, so the very first martyr who was well, blamed and found guilty of blasphemy by the Jewish council, and eventually he was stoned to death. Well, and this monastery is with the red roof to our left. And we are overlooking the Mount of Olives. And right now we are seeing the churches, of course, because Mount of Olives happens to be important also for Christians, but not with regards to the burials, but with regards to the ministry of Jesus. So what we're looking at are the two, but actually there are three churches, but we are going to visit two of them. Church of All Nations, the first one with also smaller several domes from behind. Well, it's one of the names, Church of All Nations, or the Church of Agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. Right above it, with the golden domes, is the Russian Orthodox Church of Mary Magdalene. We did a tour of the Russian compound. We did a tour of the Russian churches and the Romanov legacy in the Holy Land. And I took you on a pre-recorded tour of this church. This is just the Russian Orthodox tradition. And the church is beautiful. And by the way, the sister of Alexandra Fedorovna, wife to Russian Emperor Nicholas II, is her body is in this church. But we spoke about it before, and it's not really the point of the tour. And a little bit to the right, we can't see it from here because of the trees, but there is another important church, and that it's called Dominus Flevit, or God wept. So it's another church we are going to visit in the framework of this tour. So we are looking at the Kidron Valley, St. Stephen's Monastery, Church of All Nations, Mary Magdalene Church, and look at that. So the enormous cemetery on the Mount of Olives with the Absalom tomb and the other tombs that we've spoken about. That's exactly the Absalom tomb over there. That's it. Look at how enormous the Mount of Olives cemetery is. An interesting remark. You will see a little ramp, like 1 o'clock, something like that. You can see that ramp. It goes all the way through the entire cemetery to the very edge of the Mount of Olives. What is that? Oh, this is a very special ramp, and it is designed for the Cohens. Well, the descendant of Aaron, the Cohens, so one of the I'm not Jewish, as you know, but my husband is. It's not making me any more Jewish, unfortunately, but we've recently found out that it's not only that he is a Levite, but he's also one of the branches of his family. His maternal line is actually from Cohen. So he's a Levite and he's a Cohen. I don't know what I'm going to do about it. I don't know how I'm going to live with that, but I'm just going to have to face it and put up with it. Okay, what not? So next time he goes to the Mount of Olives, he's going to be probably taking that very ramp. The thing is that because the Cohens, they come from this priestly family and they served in the temple, they could not expose themselves to the dead flesh, because in Judaism it is considered the most impure thing ever, and that's why if Cohens go to a cemetery, especially the Mount of Olives cemetery, they are not allowed to touch the graves, and they should be walking above. They should not be touching the graves, and there has to be a safe distance between the graves, let's say the bodies, and their feet. Yeah, so that's hence the wrap. Obviously, there are certain rules. Let's say if a close family member, a child, parents, or an unmarried sister, for example, dies, then yes, the Cohens should expose themselves to the dead body. It's part of the experience, so to say. But in general, no. So You see, and the cemetery keeps growing. It keeps growing. It's incredibly expensive to be buried in the Mount of Olives. And you know what is also quite interesting? So, is that on the opposite side of the Mount of Olives, the Judean desert begins. So the Mount of Olives from this side is green, but from other side, desert. That's crazy. So we're walking down a little bit towards the south and towards one of the entrances to the Kidron Valley. So it's to our left. And to our right is the eastern wall of the Temple Mount. Now, so in the Gate of Mercy to the right, over there, this is the Gate of Mercy or the Golden Gate or Shoshan Gate or several other names. Now we are jumping, we're flying over the Kidron Valley and miraculously finding ourselves again on the Mount of Olives, overlooking Jerusalem, overlooking the Golden Gate. So just for a second. And now this is how we got to the Mount of Olives. So remember, I showed you little inscriptions, little quotes from the book of Joel, from the book of second book of Samuel. So to the right-hand side is the Jewish cemetery and the toilet, by the way. Yeah. And now we are going to see Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives, the cemetery. This, camera doesn't do it justice, to be honest. When I saw this place for the first time, I was completely speechless. Completely speechless. And even now, looking at this, again, I'm not a religious person myself, but I don't know, at times like this, in places like this, it's just like something changes in you. So that was a very, very special view, knowing exactly also how many things have happened here over the course of these 3,000 years. So far we've only spoken about the Jewish narrative and the Christian narrative. We're also going to be talking a lot more about the Christian narrative because we're going to be visiting the churches. But here is another narrative, the Muslim narrative. So what we have in Islam, in Quran, we also have this notion of the Day of Judgment. So let's just read a little bit of the surahs. The day when the earth will be changed to another earth and the heavens as well, and all will appear before Allah, the One, the Supreme. Okay, we have that. Or from the earth we created you, and into it we will return you, and from it we will bring you out once again. And the trumpet will be blown, and at once they will rush from the graves to their Lord. So we have the same resurrection story here, right? The day the earth will split open from them as they emerge rapidly, that is a gathering easy for us. So we have the same concept of gathering. We have the same concept of Allah coming, and we have the resurrection of the buried. The interesting story is, however, that it's only a much later tradition that actually connects this resurrection and judgment narrative, like Muslim narrative, with the Mount of Olives and with the Kidron Valley. It's a much later narrative. Well, and geographically, it also makes sense. Since in Islam, not the Mount of Olives, the Temple Mount is considered the third most sacred place for Muslims all over the world, and this is the Temple Mount is believed to be the place where Muhammad ascended to heaven. Well, during his night journey, the tradition kind of makes sense and connects the valley, the Mount of Olives, and the temple and the Temple Mount. So the three traditions that we have, regardless of their age, of course, regardless of even though the locations are not mentioned, let's say in the let's say in a more in a narrower context. So the three traditions identifies them as one of the same place for one of the same events, even though expected to go that to be obviously to run in a different way and a different manner. But we'll also talk about the end of days in the Christian tradition. So we are on the Mount of Olives and we are approaching the first church. So again, Mount of the Temple Mount, the Gate of Mercy, the Kidron Valley is to the left. And to our right, we have the Church of All Nations or the Church of Agony. Again, it's a combination of several videos, but before we explore the Church of All Nations, I want to take you to I want to take you a little bit further down the slope of the Mount of Olives towards the north, just like, I don't know, 10-minute walk maximum, to show you Saint Stephen Greek Orthodox monastery from the other side. We first saw it, we originally saw it from the side of Jerusalem, right? And now we can see it from the side of the Mount of Olives, which is fun. As I said, I want to give you as many perspectives as possible. I know this geography is a bit crazy. This itinerary, flying back and forth over the valley, is also a bit crazy. But I think I just need to use these perks of virtual tours. We don't have to be actually walking. I mean, I did all the walking, but it's not one on the same day. It's not even one on the same year. So, I mean, I have a collection of videos. I don't know how much even, like, I pay 200 shekels for my Google Drive just to store all the footage that I have. That's like, I don't know, about $100 per month. No, not 100. Okay, 200 shekels. How much is that in dollars? A bit less than like $80, right? Something like that. No, I don't know. Anyway, so I have a lot of footage, and I'm not. So I just don't want you to think that that is just like one season even. So that's the Greek monastery, and a little bit down we walk. There are a lot more sites in connection with the Kidron, with the Mount of Olives and the Christian site. For example, over here, I did a quite detailed tour of this location. This is an Armenian tradition, an Armenian church. It's the sepulcher of Saint Mary. So according to Armenian tradition, the Our Lady was kind of fell asleep and ascended to heaven here on the Mount of Olives, because Jesus also is believed to have ascended to heaven from the Mount of Olives. So we're just passing by. Again, we're not focusing on this particular church at the moment. So we are going to visit the Church of All Nations or the Agony Church. And we're going to talk about the significance of this area, of this mount, as well as the Mount of Olives and the Kidron Valley, already in the Christian narrative. So this is another name. So the Church of All Nations, the Church of Agony, but there is another name, Church of Gethsemane. So you may have noticed that how green this part of the Mount of Olives is. And it's like this for a reason. Well, this area has always been identified as the place of the olive gardens, hence the name, the Mount of Olives, right? Kind of pretty put two and two together. And Gethsemane is actually, well, we know that this is the place where very important events in the ministry of Jesus in his last days on earth took place. So this it was the garden, the olive garden. Gethsemane from Aramaic uh, can be translated as it's like Gachmanim. It's like an olive. Well, it's like the place where they made olive oil. So shemen means oil. Gat means press. So Mount of Olives is the place where the olives grow, and in this particular area, they used to make olive oil, which was a absolutely essential product. It's like a staples on the Jewish table. It was absolutely essential for the operation of the temple. It was also used as a medicine. It was used as cosmetics and whatnot. So let's now talk about the Gospels. So in the two Gospels, with regards to the last day of Jesus on earth, so we have the name Gethsemane, like in the Gospel of Matthew, for example. Then cometh Jesus with them unto a place called Gethsemane. In the Mark we read, and they came to a place which was named Gethsemane. So we even given this name. In the book of John, we have, with regards to the same event, we have a different name. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went forth with his disciples over the brook Cedron, where was a garden, into which he entered and his disciples. So even though it's not really called Gethsemane, but you have an idea that you probably can figure out that the Cedron is actually Kedron. Well, we're talking about a garden. So there is the garden, olive grove, and we actually have, hold on a second. We have the olive grove. Here on the territory of the premises of the church, we have 12 olive trees, which are very old. The Catholic tradition, because this church is the Franciscan Catholic Church, claims that these olive trees are about 2,000 years old and they witnessed Jesus. However, it's a tradition. The carbon-14 dating analysis is not that optimistic, I would say. So these olive trees, well, they only were able, out of all these 12 trees, I think it's 12 actually. Well, it's definitely not more than 15. I think it's 12. So out of all these, let's say 12 trees, they were only able to date 3 because they are that old. And so the oldest it gets is around the 12th century. That is the Crusader period. 8,800 years, that's also quite impressive. So this is but again, we don't know how old other trees are. So who knows? Now we are overlooking the Gate of Mercy, the eastern wall of the Temple Mount and of the old city. So this garden, why this church is called the Church of Agony? Because exactly in this very garden, Jesus would understand what he would have to be going through very shortly. And in this very garden, he also realized that he had been betrayed, and he just saw what would happen to him. And he is in agony. He doesn't want to die. And he is, the famous prayer of a cup also takes place, according to tradition, in this very garden. And this church focuses on this episode in the days of Jesus. So here we have, this is from the book of Matthew. My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. O Jesus, in deepest night and agony, you spoke these words of trust and surrendered to God the Father in Gethsemane. In love and gratitude, I want to say in times of fear and distress, my Father, I do not understand you, but I trust you. Well, so the prayer for a cup and the agony. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was, as it were, great drops of blood falling down to the ground, as written in the book of Luke. So all the four gospels refer to this event. Even though they give different names to the location, we understand that the tradition basically boils down to one and the same place. So here we have this church. The church itself was built in 1950. Um, by Antonio Berluzzi, the Italian architect who built 70 or 80% of the churches for the Franciscans. Well, he was a Catholic himself. And so this church, I believe, is one of his absolute masterpieces. So we've just been outside. It was bright, it was sunny. Most of the time it is sunny in Jerusalem anyway. And the moment we enter the church, it feels completely different. It's dark, hence the quality of the video. I'm very sorry, but I can't offer you any better quality. I tried really hard to film it. I, did a little, I just tweaked it a little bit just to make it a little brighter because it's very dark in the church. Even though there are lights, it's very dark. Well, first of all, because you have the purple stained glass, and also everything in the church is pretty dark because it symbolizes the night. It symbolizes the agony, the darkest times in the life of Jesus. So you're gonna need to find yourself in that setting. So the church takes you to that night of agony 2000 years ago. And also, when it gets to Jerusalem and the location for pilgrimage sites and the churches, there is an important thing that usually the locations for for churches, for pilgrimage sites are not, um, well, are not a coincidence. Usually it would be a tradition. So, and there would always be some sort of lineage going back to the, let's say, Byzantine times. So the Byzantine period. And in the Mount of Olives, that's exactly how things are, because this particular church from 1950s, when it was constructed, as it was being built, there were discovered mosaics and ruins and fundaments, like base of the older churches. And Antonio Berluzzi simply decided to recreate the designs of the mosaics on the floor and build the church above that place. And here, under this piece of glass, we have a much older mosaics. And usually that's exactly also what the Crusaders would do. So the Crusaders would normally build their churches above the Byzantine churches or next to the Byzantine churches. How was it? How did it look? So what did it look like? Normally, there either would be some ruins. Well, okay, so the Byzantine period, that's 4th century to 7th century, before Islam came about and before Muslims took over the Holy Land. And then the Crusaders would come in 1099, and up until 1187, they would be controlling entire Jerusalem. It would be the kingdom of the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem. So obviously, a lot of Byzantine churches were destroyed, but had been destroyed by the time the Crusaders came. But there was traditions, there were ruins, and they would take care of it and connect, obviously, their churches to the older ones. And during the modern era, I would say, still stick to the same idea, to the same tradition. In this particular church, well, we have 3 mosaics. So these mosaics refer to the 3 episodes. the central one. We will see it closer now. So Jesus is sitting on a bedrock, crying, and also sweating profusely as he's in agony and praying to God for this cup to pass him. So, and here in the altar, we see a bedrock. This is the actual bedrock. The tradition claims that's that very bedrock on which Jesus sat, as we have on the mosaic. But of course, it's just a tradition. But the bedrock has always been here, which means this bedrock was there during the times of Jesus as well. But whether it's that particular bedrock, of course, nobody knows. But we have the tradition, we have it all. There you go. To the right-hand side and to the left-hand side, there are two different episodes. So the left-hand side, we will see it's the Judas kiss. And to the right-hand side is already the Jesus being arrested. I absolutely love these 12 domes. So why does this church has 12 domes? Because of the 12 Catholic nations, 12 Catholic countries that donated their funds for the construction. I think there you can even see the French flag. Usually there would be the flag of the country. So each dome corresponds to one of the 12 countries, and hence the number. And oh yeah, of course, 12 Olive Street because it's 12 Olive Street because of the 12 nations. Of course, I mean 12 countries, but there were many more countries that obviously chipped in. It could be some, give some elements of decoration. So it's not like only 12 countries and that's it. So, but that's just, the Catholic tradition. We're going to see just one more mosaic. So we're not leaving the church just now. Also, you can see the starry, it's like the starry night because that happened during the night. So the idea is for us to imagine that we are at night in that garden and it's dark, hence the entire arrangement in the church, hence the lighting. So this is the Judas kiss. And pay attention just, to the windows, so the stained glass, the darker windows, that obviously affects the lighting and hence also the quality of this video. But it's not so bad. So I tweaked it just a little bit. It was just a little darker, and that's it. So zooming out is not a good idea, but in general, that's okay. So here we are. We are leaving the church. And again, as we leave, we see the Mount of Olives. Sorry, we see the Temple Mount and the Gate of Mercy and a little upper part of the Dome of the Rock. That's exactly the spot where Muhammad is believed to have ascended the heaven on his night journey. Mount of Olives was exactly the place, was always on Jesus's way on his pilgrimage because he lived up north in Galilee and he would walk to Jerusalem every year for a pilgrimage because, we expect him to have traveled to Jerusalem every year for the high holidays, but at least what is mentioned in the New Testament, just said at least 3 times, but we believe that it was more than just 3 times. So the another church that we're going to visit, but not today, is the Dominus Flevit, so the God wept, because obviously it's more than just the agony and the betrayal by Judas, but it's also the story that Jesus foresaw what would happen to Jerusalem. And that's what we're going to be talking next time. We're going to be talking of the events that took place in 70 AD, the destruction of the temple by the Romans, We are going to be talking about, well, we're going to be visiting several more locations that connect Christian narrative to the church. And we are also going to visit a couple more sites around the valley. But for now, we are just walking a little bit longer in the garden. I would say that regardless of the age of the olive trees, these trees have seen a lot, and having so many olive trees growing in Gethsemane garden, and also in general, the amount of olives, it doesn't matter how old they are. We know from the name and from the way it looks that yes, this is the amount of olives, and this is where it was most logical. It made most sense to actually make olive oil and have the olive press. So it all completely, absolutely makes sense to me. Well, this is the already Jesus being arrested, the arrest of Jesus. And from here, we are going to take up next time, next Sunday. Okay, let me just turn the chat back on. There you go. There you go. Let me know if you have any questions. Once again, for those who joined us a little after we started and I had my introduction, I have not scheduled the next episode yet as we will be traveling, and I wasn't sure, and I'm still not 100% sure what my timing would be, but I hope that it would be the same time. Definitely would be next Sunday, 30th of August, I believe. And that's going to be the final episode of the Kidron Valley tours. And I will announce what the next episode would be. So the chat is on. I'm sharing here all the links so far. So if you missed the first episode, you can find it on my YouTube channel, or you can access it through my website, because my website link will take you exactly to my YouTube channel. And if you enjoy this tour, I would appreciate your support. You can send me a PayPal donation. You could buy me a coffee. The links are over there. And why Bnei Hazir, meaning sons of a pig? No, it's Bnei Hazir. It's not Bnei Hazir. So it's not, it's Hazir. No, not Hazir, it's Hazir. And it's also one of the priestly families. Like, I didn't invent it. I didn't make it up. No. Hazir, not Hazir. Anyway, that's that. I know, but no, that's not that. That's not that, Dorley. I understand. It couldn't be. It couldn't be that. In Hebrew, it was written correctly. It's hair, but it means pig. That's okay. That's fine. In written, it's written correctly. So that's just it. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you. Anyway, so I will keep you posted about the next tours. It's going to be Jerusalem. It's going to be the newer area. It's going to be the 19th century neighborhoods. It's going to be the first Jewish neighborhoods as well. And I'll probably have to be using also several videos filmed across the 3 years. And hopefully I will be able, so next time I go to Israel, I will be able to film a few more locations. Thank you, Heather. I try to keep it simple. And a dead body being such an impure thing, whose duty was it to prepare the body for the burial? It was the family. The family members had to do that. The priest didn't touch the dead body. The priest did not. Well, but again, as I said, if it's a close relative, then the coins would have to be attending the funeral, would have to be in the cemetery. But in general, it's just family members. Priests never do that, and priests never do burials. This is it's kind of the Christian understanding. No, priests in Judaism, they only serve in the temple. So, Dolly, with regards to that, in Hebrew, Azir is written correctly on the lintel, but it could be the misspelling on Wikipedia because I just took that screenshot from Wikipedia because I don't really have a good photo, so I had to come up with something for you to see the lintel. My video wasn't, I would say, crispy enough. I just wanted you to see what's written there. So Bnei Hazir. It's just a typo there, I believe. But thank you for pointing it out. And of course, it's Hazir family. Of course, it's Hazir family. Thank you for joining. Thank you for your interest in my tours, and thank you for your support. Just in case there are, Dolly, thank you so much for the tips. There are about 1,200 roughly videos on my secret playlist for my sponsors. And if you are interested in all those tons of footages and hours of videos, there's also a link to see how this can be arranged. Yeah, of course, Wikipedia does make mistakes, but I've just used the image, so I need to have a look at it. But that's the Bnei Hazir family. It's Bnei Hazir grave, that's for sure. Okay, Dorley. Again, so speaking of Misha, I am living because I married Misha. That's it. I'm not Jewish. But Misha recently found out, so on his paternal line, he is a Levite. So that's true. But we found out recently that, well, it's not 100% verified, but it's most likely that one of the relatives on Misha's maternal side actually was a Cohen. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Saturday is going to be Tbilisi. Sunday, hopefully not, because of the short trip with my boys. Thank you, and bye bye.